Hi, I'm Ken Howard, and welcome to the Gay Therapy LA podcast. Today, I want to talk about gay relationships and what I call the sexual thaw, restoring sex after a long stalemate. In a recent kind of informal Facebook poll that I conducted on suggested blog topics, I gave several options, and this topic won the most votes, so here goes. Blog topics and podcast episodes, I should say. The topics sometimes overlap quite a bit. So, and listeners, all of you guys out there, please feel free to email me, ken@gaytherapyla.com, if you have suggestions for future blog articles on the website, on gaytherapyla.com/blog, or podcast episodes, however you like to receive your material in this audio way or reading. So I always say, in my long career providing therapy and coaching for gay men, 28 years in 2020, and couples therapy for gay men in California, and relationship coaching for gay men all over the United States and even in many countries of the world where I know this podcast reaches. Hello to everybody worldwide. It's very exciting to think of guys outside of Los Angeles and California and outside the United States hearing this. So, but wherever you are, I certainly appreciate you listening. I hope you find it helpful. But this topic of gay men expressing frustration over the lack of sex, or at least the lack of sexual frequency in their relationship, is one of the most common that I hear in practice. There's several topics that I hear over and over again, and that's one of them. We'll talk about others some other time. But it's so pervasive that the complaint transcends location, length of relationship, the ethnicities or national origin of the partners, the ages of the men involved. And straight couples have this complaint too, but here, since we focus more specifically on gay male relationships, which has been the majority of my clinical work and writing and research and speaking, I want to speak to just gay male relationships for now. So we define these complaints as being focused on the fact that one or both partners in a gay male relationship expresses complaint, frustration, demoralization, boredom, anger, sadness, or some combination of these or more, over the fact that to that person's mind, there is not enough sex in the relationship to satisfy the man's physical and emotional needs. This topic is discussed socially, formally, and informally. There's a joke that I heard a long time ago somewhere from a stand-up comic that says if a couple puts a marble in a jar every time they have sex in the first year of marriage, and they take a marble out of the jar every time they have sex after the first year of marriage, they'll never empty the jar. Now, that might be a bit of an exaggeration, but the hyperbole fits the sense of frustration guys can have. Esther Perel, who's a licensed marriage and family therapist in New York, she wrote the great book Mating in Captivity, Unlocking Erotic Intelligence. It's a great book if you can get your hands on it. Explored this topic for all kinds of couples in impressive detail, and she was very good about addressing both gay and straight couples. But the original tagline for that book was not unlocking erotic intelligence, it was reconciling the erotic with the domestic, which I actually prefer as the tagline. Because in relationships, especially long-term cohabitating ones, whether it's legal marriage or not, we often find this dichotomy that starts with the domestic bliss of making a home, sleeping together in the same bed, making meals, being social, vacationing, perhaps raising children together, pooling our incomes, redecorating the living room, providing mutual emotional support, doing each other favors, sharing the domestic chores, and integrating each other's greater families of origin, and especially for gay men, families of choice. The other side to that dichotomy is the erotic. Not the way we are in the living room as well-behaved gentlemen, but how we are in the bedroom, where, as Perel says, we lose the political correctness of everyday life and give in to our more primal desires. In an article on Gay Therapy LA, I talk about reconciling the living room with the bedroom. and that's another podcast episode too. And that goes into very similar kinds of ideas as today. But I'd like to describe more of the too infrequent sex complaint and offer some actual options on practical steps on what to finally fucking do about it at last. Now, I find this kind of helpful advice generally lacking in articles about gay relationships and even about sex sometimes. And in my identity, not only as a gay men's specialist therapist for individuals and couples, I'm also an adjunct professor of a couples therapy course at USC, University of Southern California, as well as a trained sex therapist through the Sexual Health Alliance. And very close at the time of this recording in December of 2020 to earning a full formal certification in sex therapy. And I'll go more into that at another time when that application process is more complete. So I tend to write more frankly and candidly about gay men's sexual issues and challenges than most of my gay male therapist colleagues. Most, not all. There's some others, my colleagues in the sex therapy field also provide a ton of good material. David Lay, Lay, who we'll talk about later, Joe Court, Kort, certainly Chris Donahue, who wrote Sex Outside the Lines, Michael Vigorito, and Doug Braun-Harvey, who wrote Out of Control Sexual Behavior. A lot of these gay male therapists, do provide the sex therapy topics, but in general, sex therapy for gay men is a real niche. We're talking guys across the country who are providers of this, not so many in any one city, especially Los Angeles, I find. So, quite importantly, I think, in my practice expertise, gay couples need to address these issues in order to find relief from sometimes very long-standing frustrations. So let's talk about defining the problem. What a lot of gay men that I see in my private practice seem to need, first off, is just an acknowledgement that the problem of too infrequent or even non-existent sex in a long-term gay relationship even exists. Somehow, some way, the couple has fallen into a sexual complacency where they just plain ain't doing it. And yet, with a reasonable medical health and overall physical functioning, their body still wants sex, perhaps as much or more when they were very young men, such as a guy in his 40s having just as much desire as he had when he was 19, and maybe he was even closeted then. I certainly was at 19. So, the etiology of this sexual stalemate can have many contributing factors. Certainly in 2020, the global pandemic of COVID-19 has put a damper on all fun things, sex included, whether it's fear of death or disability from having COVID itself, or the stress and grief of knowing someone with it, or being affected by the loss of someone who has passed away from it, or even being hurt by the economic impact of public health restrictions closing businesses with next to no government financial aid or meaningful leadership to make up for it in the United States, unlike all other Western countries that have provided fairly generous, stabilizing financial relief to their people. COVID is a certain time-limited stressor in current times, but the problem of sexual infrequency predates COVID, and I'm sure it will persist beyond it. So we need to look at it as its own problem apart from the COVID pandemic currently. Other stressors include the opposite, which is having too much work that makes a guy too tired to be sexual most days or nights. Or it's the demands of raising children, or something stressful in your environment like an unsafe housing situation, or some other economic pressure. Or certainly medical issues, low testosterone, other hormonal imbalances, and factors which we often overlook. An imbalance in your estradiol or your estrogen level can be just as problematic with sexual desire issues as low testosterone is. Hypertension and its related medication side effects that might impact erectile functioning, depression and its related medication side effects that could result in limited or diminished desire or delayed ejaculation, penile blood flow problems such as a venal leakage, prostate issues like prostate cancer and the aftermath of its surgery, or practical issues like erectile dysfunction. And there's another podcast article and blog article on erectile dysfunction, cognitive causes and cures. You might want to take a look at it if you're suffering from ED or know someone who is. And of course, the premature ejaculation, which is another practical sexual dysfunction problem. Other times there can be psychosocial stressors, which is why sex therapists are trained in a combination of psychological and the psychotherapy angle in talk therapy, but also with an eye toward the medical influences, and of course the psychosocial dynamics of a couple's relationship. So sex therapy is often interdisciplinary among providers between the sex therapist on the one hand and various kinds of medical doctors, a primary care physician, a urologist, an endocrinologist, a psychiatrist, a hematologist, etc. I think I actually have all of those. So there's many different factors that can contribute to the stalemate, and maybe that's why it's such a pervasive problem. So the interpersonal couple dynamics that can contribute to a sexual stalemate often include an unacknowledged, undiscussed, perhaps even unconscious anger or resentment at a partner, which could be anything, a sense of competition, resentment about a disparity in incomes. I have a podcast episode and a blog article on that, when yours and your partner's incomes differ greatly. In a gay relationship, when you've got two competitive men in one relationship under one roof, a disparity in your incomes can actually be a source of relationship stress. Resentment about an uneven distribution of household chores. One of you feels like the housewife, and there's resentment. Or resentment about perceived power and control. I think that power and control issues in gay male relationships are exaggerated from straight relationships, because men in general, gay or straight, are so socialized to get their way that another man telling them what to do just doesn't go over well. And I always say, if you don't realize how much privilege men have, especially white ones, gay or straight, in society, go ask a black lesbian, and she'll tell you all about it. Because sometimes we lose perspective as men, especially white men, about how much privilege we have in society that we're so used to and raised with that we don't have a perspective that it's a privilege that other kinds of demographics don't have. So you put two men together, especially two white men, of people who have been socialized like that, and the power and control issues of, leave me alone, I'm in charge, you can't tell me what to do, get really exaggerated, regardless of our family dynamics, which might also be contributing to that. Family of origin issues, I mean. So between psychosocial stressors, medical conditions, psychodynamic and interpersonal issues, and social pressures and influences, it's no wonder that the complaint about sexual stalemate is so pervasive. Now, let's talk about fixing it, which is probably the part you were wishing that I would get to. So, part of fixing it is, if we can use that term very cautiously, there's never a quick fix for just about anything in life, and certainly not in therapy, is understanding the etiology of the sexual stalemate situation in the first place. Naming a problem is the first step towards solving a problem. So to fix it, you have to consider what kind of influences and pressures got you to the place where you all are now. All dressed up with a hard dick and no place to go. So couples therapy or relationship coaching can help you uncover the interpersonal relational dynamics that might be the culprit, such as unexpressed or unresolved resentments. But let's say both you and your partner or spouse agree that you each want more sex and want help and support for making that happen. So first, you have to differentiate whether you want more sex, period, or you want more sex with your current partner. This is an important distinction. If you want sex with that hot guy from the gym, Yes, that one. We all have one. But not your partner. Think about why. Is it because of these underlying resentments? Or is it because your mind, body, and soul have gotten so used to sex with that one partner that you crave what I call novel stimulation to get yourself aroused sexually? Both gay and straight men can have this craving for novel sexual stimulation. There's a rather vulgar term some straight guys might use that sometimes you just want some strange pussy. Now, as offensive as that can be to use that word like Donald Trump used about grabbing women, you get the point. It's novel stimulation for straight men or gay men. You can get inured to stimulation. If you watch a scary movie for the first time, you might jump at certain scenes when the axe murderer jumps out from the dark. However, if you've seen that same film 5 times, you'd be like, yeah, dude, go out to the tool shed so that your flashlight burns out and cue the axe murderer in 3, 2, 1, boom. After that, you don't jump in your seat anymore. Sex with a long-term partner can be like that. Okay, so this is when he kisses my neck, now the right ear, now he takes his hand and cuffs my balls, been there, done that, yada, yada, yada. Then you imagine, Jim Hot Guy, what he would do if you were both naked and alone at long last. He would be different from your partner. He would have a different hair color, possibly, or different color eyes, or a different chest hair or facial hair situation. He'd be a different height, a different body weight, a different scent, a different voice, and different words that he said with it, maybe an accent. His hands would feel different on your body. His mouth would feel different when you kissed him. All of that novel stimulation would be like watching a new horror movie, only much more fun, and you would jump all over again. And so for some couples, going down the road of opening their relationship through a compassionate, communicative, above-board discussion of consensual non-monogamy. I'm in a certificate program for therapists for extra training in consensual non-monogamous relationships now and for the next year through an educational group called the Sexual Health Alliance, which I'm a big fan of. My previous articles on gay-male open relationships are available on Gay Therapy LA, How to Have an Open Relationship Without Hurt Feelings, parts 1 and 2. And for some very long-term happy couples where the relationship both endures a long time, decades even, and the partners each report high levels of relationship satisfaction, some version of a consensually non-monogamous relationship style with lots of discussion about ground rules to prevent emotional hurt feelings or abandonment anxiety, can really do the trick, so to speak. And there's another article on Gay Therapy LA about troubleshooting the special challenges of an open relationship and some of the things I've seen through the years. So that gets specific to what you do when an open relationship has its bumps in the road. But for couples where partners want to remain monogamous for all kinds of very meaningful for them reasons, I have another article called Hotter Monogamy for Gay Men on gaytherapyla.com. Having novel stimulation is in the form of outside partners isn't an option. The novel stimulation has to come from the creativity generated by the two monogamous partners in collaboration. It's a little more difficult, but I've seen it done, and being coached on that can help a lot. So let's go into what I call tips for the sexual thaw. This is probably the most important part if you're interested in this topic that you're looking for. So how does a monogamous couple perform a sexual thaw after a long stalemate? Of the couples I've seen in practice over the years who are successful with this, and there are some, although not all, we'll get to that, this is how they did it. In no particular order of these tips. They acknowledged, each of them, that there is a sexual stalemate, and they've been avoiding talking about it, but no more. They bravely sit down and just accept that it might be an awkward conversation, but they approach it with compassion, patience, validation, and acceptance of their respective feelings. They express a basic desire for their relationship to move from the non-sexual to the again sexual. They begin to relate to one another, not as partners they take for granted for sharing household chores, but to allow themselves to each revisit the purely sexual objectification that they had for each other at one point, even if it was long ago. They acknowledge that it can be cognitively difficult to both love your partner profoundly, emotionally, with all you've shared over the years, good and bad, and still think of the time when everything about them that sensually stimulated you, their hair, their body, face, skin, scent, musculature, laugh, smile, personality, humor, philosophies, talents, when all those things were very new. They were novel stimulation at one time. They allow themselves to begin to think of their partner in sexual terms again. Not what they say, but what they look like saying it. Not how they move, but how sexy their body is when moving. They give themselves permission to put respect aside and allow their primal lizard brain to take over. The superego takes a break while the id comes out in full force, allowing themselves to think of their partner as a highly doable man again, as an object of sexual desire. They allow for a slow pace and some awkwardness as they reintroduce physicality into their relationships. Many of these couples already report a good cuddle relationship or casual affection of sleeping together, cuddling on a couch, kissing hello goodbye, and hugs, but it's taking that next step from G-rated video to PG-13 or X-rated video that is a line that they walk back up to, just like the old days, and give themselves and each other the permission to cross that line once again. They recognize that it is a cognitive shift to think of your partner from the everyday guy who's always there to being the hot piece of meat you just want to fuck, or blow, or tie up, or massage, or whatever from here to next year. They give themselves permission to sexually objectify their partner at home, just as they sexually objectify subjects of novel stimulation in other settings, like their fantasies of hot gym guy who, by the way, has a name and a life well beyond those great biceps of his, or that hair, or that ass, or those shoulders or chest, legs of his. You know, he may seem like an object when you're at the gym of, oh, look, hot gym guy's here today. Look what he's wearing today. There's a real person behind that, and if you were with him long enough, then you know what, you'd get used to that stimulation too. They experiment with one sexual act first, taking their partner's penis in their mouth for the first time in years, pressing their cock against their partner's hole like entering the front door of a summer cabin after it's been locked up for the past winter, or like explorer Howard Carter breaking the seal to King Tut's tomb in the 1920s after it hadn't been entered for 3,200 years. They realize that the first acts in a sexual thaw probably aren't going to be as easy as subsequent acts later in the thaw, and there should be subsequent acts. After Howard Carter entered King Tut's tomb once, he went back in subsequent days to dive deeper and enjoy the treasures that being in the tomb over and over offered. They actually don't talk about it at first and let their bodies do the talking in order to move from the heady and cognitive to the more genital primal for a bit, letting go of the domestic and focusing only on the erotic. They do talk about it later to process the feelings of how sex today differs from when they were first together, and how and why those differences are important. Sometimes there are variations on the sex that they were once used to, such as experimenting with who's top, who's bottom in those roles, vanilla versus kink play, or different ways to mutually stimulate each other's bodies in the ways that work for each of them today, not what it was like years ago. So, while I realize that some of this is a bit simplified, it's important also not to overthink it. Overthinking and focusing on the domestic, cognitive, and ignoring the primal is what got them into this stalemate in the first place. Sometimes the finer points of sexual thaw are the topics of sex therapy discussions, as each partner has the opportunity to express and advocate for his own needs as they are today, very much in the present of need. Other tips that I've seen work, remember, I'm old, I've been in practice a long time and helped hundreds of gay male couples by now, include options that feel outrageous at first to talk about. Maybe you jumpstart the sexual thaw by having a three-way, often on a vacation. I have an article on the right way and the wrong way to do a three-way Three's Company. That's on Gay Therapy LA. Do you accept an offer for a four-way that you previously rejected from a couple that you know locally? Do you visit, after COVID of course, a commercial sex venue like a sex club or a bathhouse so that the couple is surrounded by the erotic energy of a commercial sex setting? Do you hire an escort who knows how to stir things up? I have an article and also a podcast on the risks and rewards of seeing escorts. That's in many places an illegal activity, so you have to put it in that context, and there's some safety issues and all that. But, gay men patronizing escorts or gay men acting as escorts is probably $1 billion business or more worldwide. It's very pervasive. Do you utilize porn to get you guys in the mood? One of my mentors in sex therapy, the excellent David Lay, PhD, wrote a wonderful book called Ethical Porn for Dicks. That's available on Amazon, wherever books are sold. And it's about how the use of porn can be supplemental and be beneficial for a relationship. Even as from the left and the right politically, we get a lot of criticism of porn. But Dr. Lay offers, the tagline is, a man's guide to responsible viewing pleasure. So responsible viewing that also gives pleasure. Do you spice things up by purchasing sex toys or bondage products that you use on each other? One classic vendor, I don't get a cut from them, maybe I should, but Mr. S. Leathers, based in San Francisco in California in the United States, has some, they have notoriously high prices, I'm afraid, but the quality of all the products that they sell is known to be very good. Fort Troff, Troff, is another vendor. I don't have any kind of commercial relationship with these vendors, but I've found that experimenting with sex toys or bondage equipment can sometimes really enhance the level of eroticism in a couple, particularly with something that's new that they've never tried before. Do you explore more edgy options in non-monogamy like cuckolding? Dr. Lay also wrote another book called Insatiable Wives, and there's other material online about cuckolding, which is basically having someone else fuck your partner while you're watching, and it's an eroticism to see them do that. You get the benefit of voyeurism, and it's according to research by Justin Lehmiller, who's a great sex researcher and wrote the book Tell Me What You Want, one of the most popular books on sexual fantasies and really the seminal research on sexual fantasies. Lehmiller is Lehmiller. He talked about how cuckolding is a fairly frequent sexual fantasy with both gay and straight couples. Another term for it with straight couples is called hot wifing. And, it's these kinds of fantasies are especially edgy and important because of their popularity. Dr. Lehmiller has said that it's very hard to find a sexual fantasy that hasn't been shared by lots of other people across the world. And he also found, in a seminar that I had with him as part of my sex therapist training, that couples who talk about their fantasies, they're associated with higher relationship satisfaction, and couples who act on their sexual fantasies even more. So the idea of validating yours and your partner's sexual fantasies is really a good dynamic in relationships, as long as it follows the thing we always say about sexual health, that includes things like consent and non-exploitation and mutual pleasure. So what permeates the discussions, either at home or in a session with a professional, are themes like mutual respect, patience, consent, non-exploitation, mutual pleasure, compassion, equal opportunities to both talk and listen, and forging mutually beneficial compromises in good faith. No matter what that looks like. It doesn't have to work for anybody else, it just has to work for the two of you, or the two of you plus any other partners that you're sexually involved with. But even in this context of compassion, there can be a place for frank and candid feelings to be shared. Sometimes a partner has to disclose that they have turn-offs from a partner and brainstorm what to do about them. They can be issues of attraction. The most common complaint is a reduced desire for a partner because one or both partners have gained weight as they transition from young men to middle-aged men, or from middle-aged men to seniors. Another one can be medical or physical traits, such as the role of psoriasis on the skin or other dermatological conditions, anal rectal conditions that make being penetrated uncomfortable, even if it was fine before, skin growths, degree of hairiness that might change over time, changes in personal scent, personal grooming, facial hair, hairstyles, changes in personality dynamic from the submissive twink to the more assertive later adulthood, and sexual style. Maybe one partner cultivated an interest in kink play while the other did not. The downside of admitting the turn-offs is how it can come off as insulting to a partner you love, but the upside is that the issues can be brought out into the open, and then coping strategies can be brainstormed or compromises identified. And looking at identifying the things that you can change easily, the things that would change only with a lot of effort, or the things that really can't be changed, like going bald or something. So that's if it's fixed, if the stalemate is fixed or addressed. So what if it's not fixed? The other huge option in the sexual thaw is, frankly, not doing it. Sometimes passively, a couple is making the decision not to have the sexual thaw because being non-sexual with each other is actually reasonably okay. There's a reason why the stalemate has persisted for so long, and that's because it works. There isn't enough pain to provoke change or enough necessity for the mother of invention to be invoked. If this is true, it's still worth discussing why. Maybe both partners are older with less biological, physical interest in sex. Maybe a relationship agreement where they get their emotional and domestic and social and homing instinct needs met with one partner, but erotic needs met with others, a fuck buddy, a series of hookups, an outside paramour in polyamory, is actually workable, practical, and stabilizing. And an empowered couple makes those choices that, again, are right for them, even if they wouldn't be right for other couples. Other times, doing the work of the sexual thaw, communicating about it, scheduling time for sex, doing exercises, processing them after, confronting the associate feelings, is just too much work. And the status quo is just less painful and less arduous. In that case, it's accepting that these are the choices that both partners are making. Other times, a sexual stalemate can mean the end of a relationship, but that's a broader discussion in couples therapy, and the actually good reasons for a relationship to end are another topic entirely. I do have a blog article on Gay Therapy LA, yet another one about how do you know when your gay relationship is over. So that's kind of a different kind of thing when you're evaluating a relationship at certain parts in its developmental stages about when it needs to end, if it does, for the emotional health of both partners, or even just one. And that's kind of a sad situation, because it means that it's run its course, or that the people are fundamentally no longer happy together. I actually, fortunately, don't see that very often. Maybe they just don't come in to a practice and ask for conjoint therapy or coaching. But in most of my experiences with the sexual stalemate couple, they actually do not want their relationship to end at all, which can actually make the situation more complicated, because if they are both clear that they want the relationship, then that's what you start with, but they want it with changes that work for them. They need to make some kind of change, but the change that they want is to make a different relationship, not to end the relationship. So fixing a sexual stalemate and achieving a sexual thaw does not mean that the couple will not face sexual stalemate again. It can be a cyclical thing, and each instance needs its own examination of the forces that created it and its own solutions, which might be different from the solutions that were achieved the last time there was a stalemate. This is common because as both individuals in the relationship age and move into different developmental stages in their lifespan, so does the lifespan of the relationship. The emotional and sexual needs of two men in a gay male couple who meet at age 37 will be different from their respective needs by age 57. And I'm speaking from experience on this. That's my situation. So, conclusion and resources. Let's talk about that. Part of my goal in working with these couples is first to reassure them that they are not doing it wrong simply because their relationship has reached a sexual stalemate phase. Gay men in general are underserved when it comes to psychotherapy. That's why so many guys seek me out, because they want a gay specialist specific therapist and coach. And globally, there's quite a few gay therapists in Los Angeles, but there's a dearth of gay therapists, especially gay male specialist therapists and gay male specialist sex therapists outside of major urban settings. And even more so when we talk about the huge dearth of available gay male specialist sex therapists in other countries. That's just kind of not a thing in a lot of the cities and countries where I work with guys outside the United States. And yet all of these guys need and deserve help, just like straight or lesbian couples. So part of my pride as a mental health and social services provider is to try to do what I can to close that gap between the global community need and the resource pool of providers who can or want to help. A lot of therapists either can't because they don't have the sex therapy training, or they just don't want to. They think it's icky or whatever. They just don't want to be sex therapists. Whereas I think it's part of quality of life, and so that's why I want to be of help. So getting support from various self-help books, videos, and seminars can all help. Different kinds of resources that you have access to, or that you can find, or that you can afford. Finding affirmative books specific to gay men's sex therapy is tough. There's some out there, and there's some good ones. But, despite my obvious, horse in the race of providing these services as my livelihood, I think there is no substitute for a direct, customized, culturally specific, and culturally affirmative services that are dynamic. A book can talk to you and say good materials, even a podcast or a blog article. But what's different that is very helpful is the opportunity to have a conversation about it. So there's talking back and forth between the resource and the person who's having these experiences, or you and a partner. So if you, as an individual, or you as part of a relationship, either dyadic or polyamorous, need or want my kind of services, then I'd be happy to help. For more information, you can always call or text me in the United States at 310-339-5778. So 310-339-5778. Have some preference for text messaging so that I can read it and reread it and get back to you. Or you can email ken@gaytherapyla.com. We have a couple of service options and providers and a couple different price points for sessions. And all the services at Gay Therapy are currently online due to the global COVID pandemic, and especially where I live in Los Angeles, California. But the sessions can also be by phone call, and most of them are in webcam platform consultations. So there's no minimum number of consultation sessions or the frequency of them that's required. You can have as many or as few as you need, or as your work schedule or your budget or your need allows. Part of the coming out process in just being gay to begin with is simply to affirm that you have a human right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that happiness includes a right to sexual enjoyment with other consenting adults. That's why gay men come out in the first place, which is an act of affirming your identity and the beauty of your natural sexuality. We may have to do these kinds of actions, asserting our right to a rewarding sex life, many times throughout the lifespan. It's work to do all this stuff and to be in pursuit of a emotionally and physically satisfying sex life, but I think you'll find that the work is worth it. So, thanks, and I'll see you next time.